Most small talk questions are bad questions asked with decent intentions. So, what do you do? Where are you from? And suddenly you're standing beside a bowl of olives, trying to summarize your existence. The awkward part isn't that we have nothing to say. It's that the question seems to require a neat little answer, while most lives have refused to organize themselves into one. So the elegant answer doesn't simply provide information. It gives the conversation somewhere better to go. Number 1. So, what do you do? It's one of the quickest ways people sort a room. Are you forgettable? Useful? Someone worth introducing to somebody else? But the moment you offer a job title, that title can take over the conversation. And there are plenty of reasons not to offer one. A stay-at-home mother may not feel like describing herself with a title that makes running a family, managing a household, and keeping several people alive around the clock sound like an extended afternoon indoors. A doctor may want one evening without somebody leaning closer and saying, "While I've got you, there's this strange pain. And if you're a pilot, perhaps keep that quiet around me. I will have a million questions." Hello, Steve. So the answer can describe what occupies you without handing over a label. A mother might smile and say, "I manage a small operation, several competing personalities, constantly shifting priorities, and absolutely no respect for office hours. What keeps you busy?" Or, "I work in medicine, although I'm happily off duty tonight. How do you know everyone here?" Both have answered. Neither has handed the room a label to use all evening. Number 2. Where are you from? This question becomes awkward because nobody quite knows what "from" means anymore. Where were you born? Where did you grow up? Where do you live now? Where do people assume you're from after hearing your accent? The person asking is usually trying to locate a bit of common ground. Occasionally, of course, it is an interrogation disguised as geography. You can normally tell by the fourth, "No, but where are you really from?" For an ordinary, friendly version, an answer with movement works beautifully. I grew up in Boston, but I've lived in a few places since. It made me very particular about coffee and completely unreliable about what counts as cold weather. Have you always lived here? That answer gives them several directions. Cities, moving, coffee, weather, home. If the question does feel intrusive, the answer can stay warm and brief. I grew up in Boston. What made you choose this city? You've answered. You haven't opened the family archives. And the conversation moves toward a choice rather than a classification. Number 3. How do you know the host? This is the administrative desk of party conversation. The person is trying to place you on the invisible seating chart. Old friend, colleague, cousin. A bare answer. "We worked together." Completes the paperwork, but kills the scene. Instead, add the moment that explains the relationship. "We worked together years ago. She was the only person who could make a Monday meeting funny, so I decided to keep her." How do you know her? That changes the subject from a social credential to the host's character. And because nearly everyone enjoys comparing stories about the person who brought them together, the conversation suddenly has a shared center. Neither of you has to perform. You're both looking in the same direction. There's also a small generosity in saying something affectionate about an absent host. People notice it. And before we continue, my book The Modern Woman's Guide to Everyday Elegance is a practical read you can finish in an afternoon. Link below. Number 4. What have you been up to? This question can produce a peculiar panic. What have I been up to? Since when? Breakfast? University? The last time we accidentally liked each other's photographs? The person usually isn't requesting a complete report. They're asking for one thread they can pick up. So, "Oh, nothing much," leaves them empty-handed. A better answer is small and current. "I've been trying to make my apartment feel less temporary. I bought one lamp, and now I'm looking for a desk. What's been taking up your attention lately?" That answer doesn't require an exciting life. It only requires something you've noticed. A book you're enjoying. A room you're changing. A recipe that has become unnecessarily important. People connect more easily to attention than achievement. What have you been up to? Often means, what has felt alive to you lately? That's a much nicer question to answer. Number 5. Any exciting plans? This one arrives carrying expectations. You're apparently meant to have a rooftop reservation, a flight to Palermo, and a linen outfit waiting near the door. Meanwhile, your actual plan is to buy toothpaste and recover from Thursday. The social intention is usually kind. The person wants to find something pleasant ahead of you. The word exciting is what makes everyone start inflating the evidence. There's no need. Nothing dramatic. I'm having lunch with an old friend on Sunday and I'm genuinely looking forward to it. What are you looking forward to? The other person no longer has to compete with a glamorous itinerary. They can mention a holiday, certainly, but they can also mention a quiet weekend, a garden, a concert, or the glorious cancellation of something they never wanted to attend. Number 6. How are you? Most people ask this while walking. That tells us something. Usually, how are you? Is a soft social knock. It says, I see you. Are we having a quick exchange? Or is there something here? The automatic answer, fine, thanks you, is perfectly respectable. Sometimes two people really are passing near a lift, and nobody needs to discover a hidden emotional landscape before the doors close. But when there is room for an actual conversation, 1 degree more honesty changes everything. I'm all right. It's been a slightly crowded week, but today is better. How's your week treating you? That doesn't unload the entire week onto a person holding a canapé. It gives them a true temperature. And truth, in small amounts, is often a relief. It permits the other person to stop performing perfect wellness, too. Number 7. So, tell me about yourself. An interviewer may ask this and mean, please organize your professional relevance. At a dinner, it usually means, I haven't found the thread yet. Help me. Still, it can feel alarmingly broad. Tell you about myself? Shall I begin with my temperament, my dental records, or the incident at school that still returns at 3 in the morning? Trying to produce a polished personal summary makes the conversation feel like an audition, so choose one corner of your life and leave it open. I'm someone who always has a project going. At the moment, I'm learning to cook properly, with mixed results. Last night's dinner required a formal apology. What do you like doing when nobody's paying you for it? There's personality in that answer, but no sales pitch. It offers a story and asks a better question. And that is what all 7 answers have in common. They don't dodge the original question. They answer just enough, then replace the category with a point of connection. Work becomes problems, origin becomes belonging, plans become anticipation, and how are you becomes the truth at a socially manageable volume. The person asking the dull question may not be dull at all. They may simply be nervous, polite, or trying to find the door into conversation. What happens next reveals both of you. You offer one honest thread. If they take it, the small talk becomes something better. If they ignore it and continue trying to sort you, their question has still given you valuable information, just not the information they thought they were collecting. Sometimes the awkward question helps. You quickly discover how curious the other person actually is. Which small talk question do you find hardest to answer? Let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and check the links below. As always, stay classy. Manners matters.